Was on.
Okay.
Good evening, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Royal Berkshire Combined Fire Authority. Quite a lot to get through tonight. We have our usual curfew because the M4 junction 12 will close again at 9 o'clock. Keeps us on our toes, though. Means we'll get through by 8:30 with your help. But we will not stifle debate. If we need to be here at 12 and you can't get home, that's what democracy is all about. So apologies first up, please, Faith and Michaela.
Yes, Joe, we have apologies from councillors Satie and Timlin.
Thank you very much. I believe on declarations of interest, there's a standard approach to members' interest. I think, Mr. Britton.
Yes, Chairman, there is no declarable pecuniary interest in either the item on the precept or on the item of the scheme of allowances.
I hope you've got that, members. You are free to vote as you feel appropriate. The minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of November, page 7 to 18. I'm going to go through each page. Look to see if there's any actions on that page and look to see if there's any comments therein. Page 7, members. Page 8. Page 9. 10. 11. 12. 13. We have an action on the DSL. The chair requested the circulation of the presentation slides to members. In answer to the additional question from the chair, Nicky Richards reiterated the culture plan was a 3-year plan. So I think that was the slides being sent out.
Yeah,
Nicky,
that was done.
Michaela, thank you for confirming. Page 14, page 15, page 16, page 17, and page 18. Members comfortable? Looking for a proposal that we adopt these minutes? Thank you, Councillor Owen. I think you're seconder to Councillor Owen Jeffrey now. Thank you. So proposed by Councillor Owen Jeffrey, seconded by Councillor Billy Drummond. All those in favour? You show. Thank you very much indeed. Are there any petitions and questions from the public? None received. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll start with announcements from the chair. I don't know if this chief fire officer has any. None. Okay, thank you. I'll draw your attention, members, to the priority 3 update, enhancing our response model. You'll receive a progress update on CRMP priority 6. And as that positive change embeds, the service will now focus on CRMP priority 3 to seek to further enhance our response model. You know, the programme of works aims to improve the availability and resilience of our response assets, as well as identify ways we can adapt our capabilities to the risks within Royal Berkshire and its residents, businesses and the like. The work will consider our total response requirements, including fire engines, fire appliances, incident command needs and specialist capabilities. The primary objective of the project is to improve the response we provide to the public 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. An early engagement with stakeholders is already underway, including representative bodies, and that's being received positively. There will be opportunities for the members to be closely involved in specific working party in due course. So please watch this space with regular updates also being provided through this authority meeting and the wider fire authority. Summer internship recruitment is open. People will know of the internship programme. We've just been recruiting for our next cohort of summer interns. The service is looking for 4 interns who are 18, live in Berkshire, and from groups that are underrepresented in our service. And those young people are invited to join us for 5 weeks in the summer. The internship programme aims to encourage young people who may not have considered a career in the fire and rescue service to explore some of the many roles available to them, and there are many within our service. Each intern will have the opportunity to gain valuable real-world work and experience and transferable skills that they can take with them into their future careers or academic pursuits, whatever they may be. The application window is open until the beginning of March. I'd like to ask members to spread the word about this in your authorities, and because seriously, members, this is an exciting opportunity. It's very much appreciated, both by the interns themselves, the young people, and by our staff. A huge amount of work goes into it. I'm grateful to Faith and her team for doing that. And I believe I'm right. I know I'm right in saying certainly one person has joined the service after the internship. Faith, can you add? Yeah, 2 people have joined. So this is something of a pipeline for us, but it's not done exclusively for that by any means. It is to send people out into the world after some tremendous work experience. And on the 2 sets of interns I've met, they are people who you would feel very proud of in terms of what they've learnt and how they view our service. Councillor Wendy Griffith.
I wondered, thank you, Chair. I just wondered if there was some pre-prepared social media stuff that we can put on our Facebook pages and stuff to get the message out.
That's a very good point.
Thank you.
Mark Antel, our cameraman, and this evening is nodding.
Yeah.
If you circulate that to members, we can make a splash of it. So thank you for that. We look forward to that group, and we look forward to them being with us. New whole-time recruits and training centre update. This week, our 12 newest whole-time firefighter apprentices have begun their training with the service. These apprentices began their journey to becoming firefighters back in the summer and underwent a rigorous selection process before being chosen to join the service. These apprentices will spend a couple of days with us next week before travelling to the Fire Services College in Gloucester to begin their training in earnest. Returning in April, the apprentices will be the first cohort of firefighters to train at our new training centre, being built at Whitley Wood, which should become operational that month. Mr. Brooks is telling me it's going well. Now, I'm sure members will join me in welcoming our new apprentices next week and wish them the best of luck as they embark on their first steps of their new careers. Did any of you see the Guy Martin programme? Recently on, Guy Martin went and spent time training with, I think it was the Humberside Fire Brigade. And when he went to Morton in the Marsh, the training centre, he was being trained with some of our apprentices from Berkshire. So I do recommend you watch it. It was a good programme. And he's a strong man, but he was feeling the pain and pressure, especially going into firehouses with fire flashes and when it was well alight. It's worth watching. I promise you. You'll be able to get it on iPlayer. Yeah. Thank you. Arrival of new fire appliances. Our service will soon be taking delivery of 3 brand new fire appliances built on Volvo platforms by Emergency One in Cumnock, Scotland. These state-of-the-art vehicles are part of the aligned Thames Valley series, but boast a range of innovative features for enhanced firefighter safety and operational efficiency. We anticipate delivery of the new appliances in March. They'll be allocated to Newbury and Thiel fire stations, where crews will undergo comprehensive familiarisation training before they go on the run. And again, Mark, when they go on the run, I think it's worthy of another press release to say they have become operational. I do remember giving the keys of Dennis Sabre about 20 years ago at Newbury Station. There is an opportunity perhaps for members to go and view them as they go on the run. This investment in our frontline fleet underscores our commitment to providing our firefighters with the best possible tools and equipment to serve our communities safely and effectively. And finally, Arctic expedition for the Fire Angel Foundation. 2 of our members of staff are currently on an Arctic expedition. Not much colder than here over the last few days, I would imagine, to raise money and awareness for a good cause. LS, Ott and Joanna Herring are on a week-long hike through the wilderness near Umeå, Sweden, with the Fire Angel Foundation. The Fire Angel Foundation provides extraordinary experiences for young women, offering immersive training for adventurous journeys that build self-confidence, develops leadership skills, and helps find a sense of belonging. We wish them all the very best of luck on their adventure. Those are my announcements. Are there any questions? I will move on through the agenda then. Issues arising from the Governance and Audit Committee. No reports have been referred, so I'm going to note that and move on. Questions from members understanding Order 30? None received. Notice is a motion understanding Order 44.
None received.
Received. Thank you. Recommendations of committees. We note items 12, the new contract standing orders and revised financial regulations, and item 13, the pay policy statement, have been recommended from Audit and Governance Committee on the 30th of January. We'll take those reports there. And items 10, the annual budget and council tax precept, and 11, scheme of allowance review, have been recommended from Management Committee on the 10th of February 2025. So those items are on the agenda for later. And so I get into the first meaty item of the evening, and you will see over the next period of time, Connor Burns show. I'm happy to introduce item 10, the annual budget. Members, I've also been the finance lead for the budget this year, and it has been quite tough, and tougher than we've seen in a number of years. I think we've ended up with a very, very good budget. We are grateful, if this is passed, to the people of Berkshire who, in their consultation responses to our request for their feedback on charging of £5 more per annum in our precept, they were generally very, very positive. 75% or more, just over, said yes, they believed that was good value. And so our budget was then built around that. There were a number of savings, cost efficiencies, but there was also, and is also in this budget, a number of transitioning projects that will make us more efficient. So there is investment in this budget to help protect our residents, improvements in the way we work already, careful management of people's money, as you would expect, and a good outcome that I think we're presenting to you this evening. Several reports. I'll take questions as we go through, so will you, Connor, but if you'd like to introduce the main, we start with the budget on page 5, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'd like to take members through the medium-term financial plan. So if members could please turn to page 19 of the pack. That shows the funding position for 25-26 and also the 3 subsequent years. So as part of the local government finance settlement, it was announced that our settlement funding assessment, or SFA, will be 13.632 million for 25-26. And the SFA consists of 3 elements. It's the first 3 on that table. So it's revenue support grant, business rates baseline, and business rates top-up grant. The SFA will increase by 1.5% for 25-26, which is well below the current rate of inflation of 3%. In addition to this, the government provides grants to compensate for under-indexing of the business rates multiplier. And for 25-26, this amounted to £2.1 million. Although it should be noted that this is £173,000 lower than the current year. Fortunately, actual business rates for 25-26 was £198,000 above the government's baseline, although this is partly offset by the business rates collection fund deficit of £106,000. Finally, the government has discontinued the services grant and the funding guarantee grant, and for this year they were worth £820,000. So if we take all of that into account, non-council tax funding will actually fall by £336,000 next year compared to the current year. Fortunately, there's better news in terms of council tax. So the council tax base will grow by 1.3% in 25-26, and this is worth £402,000. The £5 increase in the precept will generate 1.863 million. So in total, council tax income for 25-26 will be 32.156 million. There's also a small council tax collection fund surplus of £10,000 compared to a deficit of 62,000 this year. So in summary, total funding from all sources will come to 47.965 million, which is the budget. That's an increase of 4.35%, or just over £2 million compared to the current year. So I'll now ask members to turn to page 23 of the pack, and this shows a summary of the budget pressures. So as the chair says, it's been a difficult budget round in terms of dealing with these pressures. So 25-26 pressures total 2.898 million, which is substantially more than the increased funding of 2 million. So pay accounts for over 3/4 of total revenue budget. So the pay awards have a significant impact on our ability to balance the budget. Pay awards for both Grey Green Book staff for 25-26 are assumed to be 2%, which of course is below the rate of inflation. But pay awards at 2% would add an additional pressure of £821,000 to the budget. The increase in national employers' contributions is being applied to fire and rescue services in the same way as any other employer. And this will cost the authority an extra £587,000 in 25-26. While early government pronouncements indicated that we would be fully compensated for this additional burden, and the compensation announced in the local government finance settlement of £305,000 amounts to just over 50% of the overall increase. So the remainder will have to be absorbed by the authority. Over the last few years, the service has recruited a significant number of firefighters. It is anticipated that a large proportion of these, as well as others in development roles, will move from development rates of pay to competent rates of pay. This will lead to an increased budget pressure of £569,000. In addition, increments for Green Book staff will cost an additional £167,000. Resulting in an overall pressure of £736,000. Pay settlement for on-call staff will also lead to added cost of £44,000. So if we put all this together, total pay pressures will add almost £1.9 million to the 25-26 budget. There is a vacancy factor for Green Book staff of £119,000. So that will marginally reduce these pay pressures. The authority is also facing unavoidable pressures around some major contracts and payments that have to be negotiated or coming up for renewal. Also included is the uplifting authority's share of costs for running of TBFCS. So in total, these amount to £308,000. And as the chair said, the budget does contain some bids. These amount to £636,000. They've been built into the budget and are shown in detail on page 22 of the pack. So these bids have been scrutinised by the Budget Working Party, and they are necessary not only to maintain service delivery, but as the chair says, also to transform the way we work through the implementation of new ICT systems. Not all bids were successful and some have been put on hold, but these may be funded from the Transformation Fund during 25-26. Finally, there are also pressures due to the reduction in filing grant and normal contract inflation. So to help bridge the gap between the additional pressures and the additional funding, various efficiencies have been identified for 25-26. And these are shown on page 20 of the pack, and the amount's £517,000. Further detail of these is shown in the efficiency and productivity plan, so I'll be coming on to that later on. So in terms of capital investment, I will address that in more detail when we come on to the SAFE. But from the perspective of the MTFP, there is a reduced budget pressure on the revenue budget of £380,000 in 25-26, and this is shown on page 24 of the pack. This is primarily due to the reduction in the budget for direct revenue funding of capital in 25-26, and this had been increased by £346,000 in the current year. Importantly, while the financing costs for the capital programme increased from 26-27, the ratio of financing costs to the revenue budget remained below the authority's prudential indicator, which has been set at a maximum of 3%. So a summary of the changes to the base budget is shown on page 26 of the pack. Cost pressures of £2.898 million have been partly offset by efficiencies of £517,000 and reduced revenue financing costs of capital of £380,000, leaving that net pressure of £2.001 million, which matches the increased funding to balance the budget. So while setting a balanced budget was the primary objective of the Budget Working Party, the chair of the Budget Working Party also set two further objectives: to ensure sufficient resources will be available to continue to provide a high level of service to the public, but also to make provision for that investment in new ways of working and the adoption of new ICT systems. So lastly, while the proposed budget does meet these objectives, there are some risks that need to be highlighted. So the first relates to pay awards, and on page 25, you can see there the incremental additional costs of pay awards above the budgeted 2%. So for example, a pay award of 3% would add an additional pressure of nearly £300,000, which, all other things being equal, would need to be funded out of the budget contingency reserve. The other risk worth highlighting relates to possible increases in contractual costs due to the increase in employer NI contributions. As always, these risks and any other pressures that arise in the year will be carefully managed through monthly budget monitoring, and there will be regular updates provided to the lead member for finance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Conor. I'll take the MTFS now, the MTFP. I've got a couple of comments and then throw it open to members. And of course, we will vote on these, if you don't mind, on block, unless there are people who feel they'd like to vote in different ways for different ones of this report. I want to emphasise page 6. And by the way, I think this budget is well laid out. It's very easy to follow. The tables give us a very good, easy understanding. I don't know what your own authorities are like, but sometimes they can be a little bit labyrinthine. I think this one is very well laid out, and thank you, Conor. And thank you, Conor, to you and all your staff for the heck of a lot of work you do on that. We sort of expect it from the top table, but thank you. So page 6, we have invested. There have been some, Conor said that we've had to delay, but there's been a lot of investment. You can see it there. And look at the investment in training. Conor also said, and I don't want it to go unremarked, we have invested in more firefighters, more whole-time firefighters, bearing down a little on overtime, where sometimes it's a struggle to get people to take overtime. And overtime is something you want to manage, because there's an optimum amount of overtime, an appropriate amount of overtime that you have to keep in charge of. Conor's been very upfront about the risks, and particularly in the pay award. We see inflation tipping up to 3% again today, and the trajectory is to 3.7%. So within the year, the pay award may be influenced by that, even though the Bank of England is saying it should be down to 2% by this time next year or thereabouts. So sharp rise, sharp fall. We will see. But we've been completely transparent about this to you and the public. And on page 25, if it were 3%, for instance, we would have a pressure on our budget of £292,000. Now later, Connor will take you through the reserves because we do have a budget contingency reserve to absorb pressures where they occur. That's fair to say. The members, leaving it open now to your comments. This has been through Budget Working Party, Management Committee, who recommended it here. That does not mean I'm trying to stifle debate. Vice Chairman, first up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I haven't got a lot more to add to what you've already said because you've highlighted some of the points that that I was going to make. Certainly, in terms of the budget bids and the extra training and other areas where we can obviously increase efficiencies. Because I think it's really important to know that last year's budget we did increase the establishment firefighter establishment by 10 on a permanent basis. And that's fine because as in the chair's comments before, those people have done the training, but all the time we're getting new people joining because we're also losing people. So there's an operational churn here, which affects the numbers of people who are actually what we call on the run. Clearly it's good that we can get people trained as quickly as possible. So some of the budget bids that we've accepted are certainly will help in that regard. So I think that's really important to note. And I think that work's going to continue because I don't see this particular trend ending any time soon. It's a trend right throughout. I think the National Fire Service particularly affects Berkshire because of our closeness to London, and obviously firefighters towards the end of their career perhaps opting to go to London. We'd rather they stay with us due to the issues with their pension. So that's one of the factors. But overall, I think this is a positive budget. There's no cuts in the budget, and many of us are facing our own local authority budget meetings under the Council for Social Care in Reading. It's a £56 million budget, and I tell you, there's a lot of pressure in there. We know what the pressures in social care, and there are obviously things there we would describe as cuts within those budgets. We all know that, but here, fortunately, we've managed to avoid anything like this. But as Jeff said, actually has been quite tough to reach a balanced budget. And if it hadn't been actually for the Fiver for Fire, which the government, I think, it's a good decision by the government to grant us that ability to charge residents, this would have been an awful lot tougher. So we are grateful for the people of Berkshire, those that are being consulted, to give that 75% approval rating. I think when you go to your local authorities and look at the approval ratings of the likely 4.99% increase that most of us will be setting, you'll see that approval rating will be considerably lower. So I think people of Berkshire value the fire service, and quite rightly so, because we've been judged at the last inspection. We're waiting the results of the next inspection as a good service, and I know that to be the case. So people value it and are prepared to pay an extra £5 a year on Band D for that service. I think we still represent excellent value for money when compared with other authorities right across the country. So I think it's great to get that sign off from members of the public, but equally as we go forward, that I think as all of us as members of the Fire Authority, whatever political party you belong to, particularly ourselves as Labour members, we're a Labour government, we will be talking to the government about issues around the service grant. We'll be talking to the government about giving us a 3-year pay settlement. We want that for our own local authorities. A 3-year settlement will enable us to plan better for the future. And there's some other issues as well that I think some of us are going to the national conference at Newcastle next month. We can get a chance to talk to ministers. I'm sure others will do that, because I think it's an important time for the fire service now. We've got a new government. We've got a new head of the FBU. And I think let's hope we get some really positive changes going forward that will affect the budget situation, hopefully in a positive way, and also transform the way that we actually work as a service. Some of those more efficiencies can start to come through. So I commend the budget. It's an all-party affair in terms of the working group. And as I think obviously the Labour group would be supporting this. As Vice Chair, I would recommend that we support it. and to thank members for turning up tonight to hear the Connor's. As I say, thank you, Connor, as well, and his team for the work that they've done in putting this together, because it's absolutely done meticulously and just right to draw attention to the way the papers are laid out, which can bear comparison to some of the reams of paper we some of us will see next week, and the way it's presented. It's been really well done, so it's very clear what's going on here. So thank you very much, Connor, as well.
Thank you for that, Vice Chair. I draw attention, I thank you, Dennis, I've got you. Members of the management committee and those involved in the recruitment and retention working party will know we've done some very good work on how we can work up an enhanced employee value proposition, reasons to join, reasons to stay. And we're hoping and expecting that to make a bit of a difference. Retention of firefighters in particular, whole time is under pressure. How can you make this a better place to work? Because quite often people will stay where they're valued rather than go for bigger salary elsewhere, go into the unknown. And also, how do you get more people applying Green Book as well as Grey Book? I think I try to avoid other members talking about all the pain you have in your unitary authorities balancing your budget. Vice Chair, thank you for that. I could go on at West Berkshire equally about the exceptional financial support we're hoping to get, and then I would trigger Simon Werner to say my exceptional financial support is bigger than yours, and etc., and we'll get off the mark. But I think Dennis indicated, and I think Tina may want to come in as the senior Conservative member. Dennis Pennyworth, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you very much to Connor and the finance team. I was able to sit on a few of the working party meetings, and the help was valuable and really appreciated from this side of the table. Thank you very much.
Grateful to you. Are there any questions or other points members would wish to make? As I say, this has had a very thorough going over in the budget working party and in the management committee. But I've got Councillor McElroy.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to echo, I think everything that you said there is quite reasonable, and I think in the context that we've got as an authority, I think this budget is okay. It's fine, it's good. The two, I guess, comments that I wanted to make are, I guess, out of the scope of what we really have control over, is to point out it's very frustrating to see that the Employer National Insurance Grant doesn't cover the actual increased costs, and that's basically austerity hidden somewhere, because we're expected to make that up from our budget. Kudos for finding that budget elsewhere, but I just wanted to get on the record. I don't think that's right. And to explain myself at management committee last week, where I abstained on the council tax vote, I guess that was a bit of a petulant rejection of the concept of the way council tax is raised at the moment. But I feel it's a very regressive way to raise money, and I know we have no control over that, but I kind of resent that that's where we've got to go for more money in such a regressive way. But I think overall, seeing the budget, you won't get an abstention from me tonight. I think I will support what is here with those couple of things on the record. Thank you, Chair.
Well, it's good to hear you will support it. Thank you. It's disappointing on the NICs, but I'm not going to get political about that. It does affect our contract costs as well, of course, because where we use the party suppliers, they're under pressure there. But I'm straying into suddenly the Labour Party members are laying into me. So I'm going to move on rapidly and hope they'll let me carry on. Other members, Councillor Werner.
Yeah, you mentioned about the pay settlement. We don't know what that pay settlement is. We've allocated 2%, but as Jeff says, it's slightly heading up for 3%. Inflation's 3.7, I think I heard. So that's obviously a significant worry. I know that contingency reserves are being boosted up and have been over the last couple of years. How much more will a 1%, what is 1% increase and how much of the contingency reserves gone up in the last couple of years?
Before I ask that, the reserves is a separate paper, but the page 25 shows the incremental increases speculatively, Councillor, speculatively.
Yeah.
So please answer the question directly.
Yes, so in terms of an extra 1%, that's £292,000 additional cost. So as the chair said, I will be coming on to reserves and showing what we've done to prepare for that.
And you feel that we've got enough to be able to cope with perhaps a 2% increase without catching too much of a cold?
We certainly have the ability in the short run.
In the short
do
run,
that, yes.
I think it's fair point. In the short run, we are stable, but frankly, over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, pressure, I think, may very well grow. Thank you for that. So I'm not taking a vote on that in isolation. We move on to the efficiency and productivity plan on page 29, and back to you, Con.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so members, the first part of the plan comprises cash flow efficiencies. These are detailed on page 34. As highlighted in the MTFP, they amount to £517,000, and they're shown in the table on page 35. There's a restructure of facilities, building and maintenance support team, and this will build internal capability and will realise net savings of £61,000 by reducing our reliance on external contractors. In terms of contractual savings, we've got falling gas and electricity prices, as well as our initiatives to reduce our carbon footprint. And this will see a reduction in utility costs of around £205,000. Altogether, there will be savings on contractual expenditure amounting to £269,000. There will also be savings on the budget lines for training apprentice firefighters. Given the projected operational staff turnover in 25-26, it is anticipated that the number of apprentice firefighters required next year will be lower than the current year, and this will save £158,000. In terms of income generation, 2 of our former service houses will generate an additional income of £17,000, and an agreement with West Berkshire Council to rent space at our headquarters will generate £12,000 per annum. So that's the first part of the efficiency and productivity plan. Second part details projects that will deliver productivity gains over the medium term, as well as documenting productivity gains delivered in the current financial year. So the table on page 37 shows the hours that will be saved due to productivity gains from various initiatives. In 25-26, it is anticipated that there will be gains of over 4,100 hours, and a further gain of 4,700 hours in 26-27. And thank you, Chair.
Just to be clear, page 37 is hours that we're saving, which of course we can monetize, but we show that efficiency in delivering those initiatives, driving down the amount of time spent on them. Members, again, straightforward, I believe, and I will move on back to you, Connor, I think, please, onto which is the next one. Safe strategic asset investment framework, page 49, members.
Thank you, Chair. So the strategic asset investment framework sets out the authority's capital expenditure over the next 10 years. The framework envisages a front loading of investment in our estate to modernise stations and reduce the service's carbon footprint. Next year should see various improvements, improving the thermal performance of building fabric and replacing outdated and inefficient heating plant. There will also be a major redevelopment at the fire station. The expenditure on the estate is shown on the page 51. Period of media plan presented, 10.55 million will be spent on this stage. However, it also needs to be recognised that as condition circles are updated, it makes little sense in spending significant funds on some of our older buildings. And the need for building new fire station may become more urgent. Should this be the case, the state will be updated to reflect the new reality. Thank you. So if members now turn to page 65, you'll see phasing of our heating equipment expenditure. So the replacement programme for frontline we continue to look for opportunities and to build a more environmentally sustainable fleet. There will also be significant expenditure in 25-26 on renewing operational equipment that has reached end of life. In terms of ICT, there's a shift away from perpetual licensing of software to subscription-based services, and this will impact the SAFE going forward, as the authority will be no longer capitalising software purchases. ITC expenditure is shown on page 68, and for 25-26. In summary, capital expenditure over the next 4 years is affordable with a significant proportion of fleet and ICT expenditure funded from the revenue budget. The state's expenditure will be covered by capital receipts, the development fund and additional borrowing. And all financing costs of capital projects have been built into the medium-term financial plan. Thank you, Chair.
Members, I'm going to bring Councillor Shepherd-Bay in because she's a lead member on strategic assets and sustainability. We've done some terrific stuff over the last 10 years, probably. We've built new stations. We've refreshed other stations. It's been the biggest refresh and replacement program I've seen in 30 years being involved with a brigade. We have got a couple of big challenges, I think, ahead in a couple of stations, probably more than two. Caversham Road, you know, Newbury. And at the moment, and this is something to think about, Councillor Shepherd-Bay, there's no big income there or capital receipt that would enable us to undertake those schemes of replacement or refreshing. So it's something to be looked at. Is there a capital receipt we could generate? I don't know. I'm speculating, because when you go to somewhere like, well, you go to Theale, you go to Wokingham, now go to Slough, you see terrific stations. You go to Crowthorne, you go to Hungerford. These are tremendous stations, and then you go to Newbury, and it is good enough before the press pick up on it, but it needs refurbishment. So that's my challenge to you and the service, to look over the next 2 to 3 years to how we can develop that amount of money to invest. Don't just mean Newbury, I think Bracknell. I'm not going to go through the assets here. Bracknell's been done. I'm being okay. That's another one on my list I have to do. Wokingham Road, Caversham Road. There's some challenges here. Mr. Brooks, you know this, and I'm just teeing up the organisation to start looking for where that investment may come from, so that even if it's not done for a number of years, it's in the pipeline. So over to you, Councillor Shepherd-Bay. It's your report.
We don't have enough money. We never have enough money to do everything we want to do. We have to compromise. And what can we do that will make the thing at least usable, if not perfect. It's going to take more money and we have to find the money. Government right now is not being extremely generous with money. Outside for an example, answer, and the extra costs that we have from things like national insurance and things like this are causing problems with fire service. We will have to find savings somewhere along the way to pay for the things that we need to do.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I do want to emphasise though, and finish, unless members wish to add anything else, that we are investing in equipment, including new fire appliances, and they'll be on the run as you heard earlier. So this is a good programme.
Yes.
I'm challenging it to look at 5 years hence, 6 years.
I mean, I think it's really vital. Because it's the bus services, this fire engine, which is your local fire station. It is a public fire service, and just quite right to highlight some of the excellent works being carried out over the last few years in terms of respect on some of is a priority, Newbury, and so we're going to have to be extremely imaginative, you know, and also work with other partners to be able to deliver the sort of improvements that we want, because from the existing budgets, as we've made clear, that's not going to be not necessarily going to be easy. But I would want to sort of highlight there has been a, I'm going to say this is going to say partly political, should we on sustainability. We're seeing that in some of the carbon projects at the stations, and I'm going to be nice to Councillor McElroy. He mentioned austerity, Labour's, it's nonsense, but he was the lead member for a year doing this, and there was some momentum gathered, you know, during that time, and it's carried on now. Obviously, Councillor net zero targets, but it's important as an organisation that we set an example in terms of making it as efficient and sustainable as possible. So a lot of these projects are certainly around that. But as the chair points out, really, this is a kind of movable feast, really. This plan. I mean, I think, you know, it says they were going to spend 1.3 million on Caversham Road in 2027-28. Well, maybe, because sometimes refurbishing old stock is not as good as building a new station. So that will be that's the challenge. I think the chair set up, we'll all be setting up. We're involved with this, so we can get as many new stations as possible. I think we're looking okay on as regards appliances, as regards IT, because that's really important as well. You know, some of the things now that the IT team can do is brilliant, using AI and all those types of things, tracking data. That's all brilliant. That will make us much more efficient. But the public face of this is the fire stations and the fire engines, and it's really important that we get this right. So, as I say, a lot of momentum has been gathered over the last number of years, with a lot more emphasis on sustainability. And that, and I'm looking at Mr. Brooks, you know, he laid out an excellent sustainability plan, came to I think the last authority meeting with a clear pathway for that. So I think that's the sort of areas where members can get involved, both in their local, pressing obviously for improvements in their local stations, also bringing some of their expertise in those areas as well. So I'm really sort of kind of excited by all this stuff, as you can probably see. But so there is a lot more work needed to be done, and there is some financial challenges. And again, going back to my earlier comments, you know, we will be lobbying the government. It's a tough job taking over after the 14 years of the previous government. It's tough, But we, you know, I think we can find the resources to do this, but we might have to box clever, work with other agencies, with the police, other people with collaboration, developers, goodness knows what else, to make sure we can have the, you know, in 10 years time, most of us probably won't be on the authority. And I'm looking at some that might be in the direction of younger people. We're not, but we like to leave a, you know, a well appointed, well serviced, well regarded service with good buildings, because it's our staff that are actually doing their work in them as well. That's the other key thing. A lot of these changes are to do with making sure that we have, you know, we have good changing facilities and all sorts of other things that meet modern requirements, which I think we can all be clear about. So I'll finish now, but I think this is really important. I think this is a good start, and it's well laid out again, Connor. Thanks.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'm hoping this is working now. It seems like it is. We're sort of tiptoeing towards a bit of political spat here. I'm trying to avoid it. You're making some pertinent points, sir. But if I were sitting on the Conservative benches now, I might be making some pertinent ones back. I'd rather they didn't, but I'm trying to keep us to the matter in hand, which is the budget. So I'm going to head on, and I've got some Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can go to page 69, this is a very detailed point, but if you look at the penultimate paragraph there, preparing the service for migration away from PSTN telephony, currently meant to be end of life and switching off by the end of 2025. What is the backup if that, or rather more accurately, when that happens? What is actually going to be the technical backup that we have, please?
I've got Wukash, who will take that.
Voice over IP technology, so we will be delivering communications over broadband connectivity. So there is a project underway with the authority approved as well, which improves dramatically our the stability and resilience of our internet provision, over which the telephony will be delivered.
If I may, I think that I've actually been told more or less that before. How utterly confident do we feel as an authority in terms of it being over IP?
So this is the technology that is replacing PSTN. So we are confident that it is going to be delivered over IP. There are various ways of delivering internet connectivity to the authority, and we're to all the premises within the authority, within the county, and we're exploring different means of delivering that. But the technology will be voice over IP. That's the technology that the government is pushing as well. The Home Office, in conjunction with operators like BT, are developing and ensuring that it's resilient enough to provide the level of service that is required for 999 responders.
You will have to wait and see, Councillor Jeffrey. I noticed the look on your face. You've been in that sort of game before, and you know about slippage, but I'll leave it for you to watch. But Wukash would appear to feel confident, and that satisfies me. Thank you, members. Noted the SAFE report, and back to Connor for the Treasury and Investment Strategy.
Thank you, Chair. Members, one of the key purposes of the Treasury strategy is to demonstrate that there will be sufficient resources to pay for the authority's capital programme, and also to show that it is affordable. So the first table on page 82 of the pack shows anticipated capital expenditure over the next 4 years. The second table shows that capital expenditure can be funded from capital receipts, the development fund, and direct revenue funding up until the end of the current year. After that, the authority will need to borrow to finance a proportion of its capital programme. The table on page 83 shows the authority's capital financing requirement. This is the total amount of historic outstanding capital expenditure that hasn't been covered by revenue or capital resources. So the table shows the capital financing requirement increasing from 25-26, confirming that the authority will need to borrow in these years to finance part of its capital programme. And the graph on page 84 shows the liability benchmark, and this is an indicator of future borrowing needs, and it equates the net loans requirement plus a short-term liquidity allowance. For the authority, this is similar to the outstanding loans balance, as we only borrow from the PWLB, so it's pretty simple for us. And the table on page 85 shows investments falling from 10.8 million at the end of 24-25 to 6.4 million by the end of 25-26, as capital receipts and reserves are spent on the capital programme. The table on page 86 shows debt increasing from 8.9 million to 16.9 million over the 4-year period of the MTFP. And it's anticipated that the authority will take out £9 million of new loans and repay maturing loans of £1 million. So to summarise the borrowing position of the authority, the capital programme over the next 4 years is certainly ambitious, but it does remain affordable. The ratio of financing costs to the net revenue stream is set out on page 96, and it shows the ratio increasing from 1.71% in 24-25 to 2.99% in 28-29. Ensure that the capital programme remains affordable over the medium term, the authority has set maximum limits on this ratio, and this ratio will not rise above the 3% set out over the period of the medium term financial plan. Thank you, Chair.
So to reiterate that, one of our fiscal rules here is that our borrowing will not go over 3% of our net revenue costs, but it's getting pretty tight at 2.99% on its present trajectory. So watch this space, members. I think also the other stark one is on page 85, where from 25-26 onwards, we do not have a capital receipt expectation. And that's to be expected. I mean, for years we didn't have capital receipts, we didn't have anything to sell. Then we had D Road in particular. But nothing on the horizon. So that adds to your challenge, Councillor Sheffield Bay, in terms of, our estate. Noted, members, can we move on? Thank you very much. Next one up then, please, Connor, which is the reserves policy, and this will show the actual net reserves in the different accounts and ledgers. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. So the reserves policy sets out the authority's rationale for the level of reserves that it holds and how these reserves could be used in future years. So if members could turn to the table on page 112, and this shows the movement in reserves over the next 4 years. And this year it's planned that the transformation fund will be topped up by £126,000, and that's from the anticipated surplus on the current year's revenue account. So some members, management committee, will remember that we're forecasting a surplus of around £120,000 for this year. That was at Q3. The budget contingency reserve and the general reserve will also be topped up from other reserves. We won't be using or holding any money within the vacancy reserve and the detectors reserve, and that money will be transferred to the general reserve. And equally, there will be a transfer from the development reserve into the budget contingency reserve. So members will see that over the next 4 years, reserve balances, including that capital receipt reserve, will fall by 48%, and this is primarily due to the use of capital receipts to fund that capital programme. There is also some movement on specific earmarked reserves, so we are holding, for example, a big grant in relation to ESMCP, around £700,000, Similarly, we've got money set aside for the replacement of the TVFCS systems, ITC systems. So this fall 48%, while it may seem a very steep fall, it has been planned for. So members will be aware of the planned use of reserves at previous budget meetings. But we feel this is an appropriate use of reserves and it does enhance or renew the authority's operational assets. So it's a very good use of the reserves that we have, and indeed the development fund is set aside for funding capital expenditure. Under section 25 of the Local Government Act 2003, the chief finance officer is obliged to report on the robustness of the estimates and the adequacy of the proposed financial reserves. So I believe that the reserves will remain adequate over the medium term, as the authority will maintain the budget contingency reserve at 3% of the revenue budget to deal with unforeseen in-year budget pressures. In addition, the general reserve will be maintained at 5% of the revenue budget, and this will provide short-term emergency funding for low-risk, high-impact events. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Conor. I'm grateful to you. I'm grateful also that you've been able to build up the budget contingency somewhat. You're forecasting an underspend at the year end. That comes home, that's taken into account here. Councillor Werner, you can see that budget contingency 1.615 million does allow for the pay award to be more than the 2%. Obviously, that's where we would make up the numbers, and for perhaps, you know, a difficult flood winter or a spate of fires. So, you know, it's there. We know why it's there, and I think this overall picture, although not as good as it has been, boosted, I think, in the past by the development fund being so high against the capital, you know, investment program we were doing. But Councillor, you want to come back?
Yeah, thank you. I think it is a good budget. I mean, my concern is obviously with the experience of the previous administration of Windsor Maidenhead, the use of reserves for revenue items is not supportable over 1 year. So yes, it's a solution for a year, but it won't be a solution for subsequent years. I'm glad that we're sticking to the ratio of borrowing, because again, that's where the previous administration came unstuck in Windsor Maidenhead. It's very easy to just nudge over that in the during the year, so it's going to be really important to keep that underneath. But yeah, I am concerned about the relying on reserves if the increase is over 2%, which, and I think we all know it's going to be, but that's the position we're in, I think. So
Well, you're right to be, because of course, you know, that's a recurring cost.
exactly, yeah, which is where Windsor Maidenhead
So you
came
withstand it,
unstuck
you withstand it comfortably in the year, but you've got it next year and the year after. And yeah, you're quite right. But overall, we are in good shape at this point,
Yeah.
with many pressures and risks ahead of us. Members, we move on to the final part then, in terms of value fire control. You mentioned just a moment ago, you've got a fund in there for replacement. Is that's separate to their accounts? Can you just clarify that for us, please?
Yes, so that amount that is showing there in our reserves, that's our share of the TVFCS sinking fund. So each authority has a third.
So back to you for the their budget, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So yeah, the TVFCS budget. This budget was presented to the Joint Committee back in December, and it's presented every year in December. So there's a bit of a lag between the budget that's approved by the Joint Committee and by the time it comes to Fire Authority. So in terms of the assumptions there, sometimes there is some movement in those assumptions within those couple of months. So that's just something to bear in mind. But the Joint Committee recommended that the Fire Authority approve the TVFCS budget for 25-26, and this will be £3.007 million. This will be an increase of 4.6% compared to the current year. And the main factors for the increase in the budget requirement relates to the increase in employment costs. So that's the budgeted pay award of 2%. There's also an increase in the local government pension scheme deficit payment and a reduction in staff turnover within TVFCS. And the reduced staff turnover means that the number of staff who have achieved full role competence and with the accompanying uplift in salary is increased compared to previous years. Spending from the renewals account in 25-26 will be used to provide a number of fixed term roles to make up an initial resourcing team for phase 1 of the TVFCS replacement project. And then also the long-term forecast of payments into and out of the renewals fund is shown, and it shows the available funding for system replacement, which must be completed before 2030. In terms of that renewals fund, it is generally acknowledged that there isn't enough money within that fund to fully pay for the replacement project. I have built in some additional amounts both within the SAFE and also within the MTFP to account for that. But we will know more about that as the year progresses and the work of that replacement project team develops. So again, just to flag up, in terms of the TVFCS budget, it was assumed that the NI increase would be fully compensated for, and that was the position in December. That's obviously changed, but every year the TVFCS budget includes a contingency of £150,000. So that caters for any of these eventualities. But of course, it's just one movement, and there will be other movements in the year. So we will see where the budget ends up, or the actuals end up. Thank you, Chair.
I don't want any more members to mention national insurance and NIC increase. We're making progress here. I don't want to go backwards. Final one then, unless you've got any points that you've got. TV FCS, Councillor Jeffrey.
I hope that Connor won't take this amiss, but I do find it mildly ironic that obviously as a finance person, he looks upon people being good at their jobs and staying in their jobs as being a bit of a problem because they're costing a bit more. Whereas I think many people in this room will say, isn't it wonderful we've got people that are committed to staying in the fire control service and are achieving those additional levels of experience and ability. And quite frankly, I think that's a few bob I don't mind paying in that particular direction. And I think it's pretty good news that we have got such an excellent fire control service. Thank you very much.
So noted. I'm not going to ask Connor to respond. Thank you. I'm moving on to fees and charges. It's a part of the budget.
Very quick, Chair, just to say that
Very quick, please. Yeah.
upgraded them by about 2%. That's it.
So average about 2%, right? Now, is this interview with Fire Officer, is that an interview with you, Chief Fire Officer? Is that what it costs to interview? So, because we're very privileged to get your experience for nothing.
The bill for my PDR sessions on its way in the one-to-ones, Chair.
But whoever that interview is, we should do more of them. There's a good income generation opportunity, I would have thought. But anyway, members, I'm not going to dwell on this project anymore. We've given it a very good airing, partly to make sure that we've understood it, we agree it, we're prepared to support it, but also because there are people watching this at home. There are hundreds and hundreds of them hanging on our every word. And, well, there will be some. And also the press of Berkshire will be watching this. So it's important that we give it a good airing and a good clarification. Members, the intention is now to take all the recommendations on block. We see on page 6 that Fire Authority must approve from 2.1 to 2.8 the increase in the Band D precept, the MTFP, the Efficiency and Productivity Plan, the Strategic Asset Investment Framework, Approve the prudential indicators of Treasury strategy and investment strategy. Approve the reserves policy. Approve the TBFCS revenue and capital budgets, and approve the fees and charges. I'm going to take this in on block, and it will be a named vote, and Mr. Britton will call out your name shortly, and we'll look for you to say for or against. So members, we're in your hands now. This is the vote. Over to Mr. Britton, please.
Thank you, Chairman. To add to the drama, I'll conduct a roll call by surname alphabetical order. When I get to your name, please indicate whether you vote for, against, or indeed abstain. Please, starting with Mr. Bello. Thank you. Pennyworth.
An apolitical 4.
Thank you. Brooks. I beg your pardon, Blundell. Thank you. Brooks.
4.
Thank you. Brown.
4.
Thank you. Drummond.
4.
Thank you. Brewer.
4.
Thank you. Gahir.
4.
Thank you. Gittings.
4.
Thank you. Griffith.
4.
Thank you. Jeffrey.
4.
Thank you. McElroy.
4.
Thank you. Mackenzie Boyle. Thank you. Nazir.
4.
Thank you. Shepherd Bay.
4.
Thank you. Smith.
4.
Thank you. Taylor. Thank you. Werner.
4.
And if I've not missed anyone, that's unanimous.
Very, very good to have that unanimity, and I'm grateful to all members and staff. And I think we have a good budget. Well done, everybody. Moving on then back to the main agenda, 11, scheme of allowance review. Members, in introducing this, let us remember this is an independent panel. It's been through management committee. I invite comments. Members, of course, if we were to vote to implement it, individual members could inform the payroll department not to actually take theirs, should they wish. But we'll see how this lands. It's been a recommendation, we take it. I think it's always difficult for members to vote for their own pay increases, but it is via an independent panel's recommendation. Do we have any comments? Vice Chairman?
Thanks, Jesse. That's what I'm going to say. It's not really our pay; they are allowances. There is a subtle distinction with that. I mean, of course, we do get paid as such, but these are allowances, and they're set there. And they're set there as an agreed amount of things that we do, and they're done. An independent panel looks at it, and we've also got the formula where it will link to the to the green book, and that's something we decided a couple of years ago, just to obviously to try and take this thing out of this, because occasionally this can become controversial, particularly when you've got pay disputes going on. I mean, all I wanted to say is that I personally don't think this should happen. I don't think for local authority members or for fire authority members this should be national. This should be done nationally based on the size of your authority, what type of authority you are, and to take the heat out of this. And I mean, I noticed it actually in Parliament. Of course, it is immensely controversial, but they do have a panel there that sets it. They do have to vote on it in the end. But I think that this should be done. One of the things I do think should be done centrally, taken out of our control. But it probably won't happen. So I can make the same speech every year. But I think this is a sensible approach, and I support it.
Grateful to you. I'm going to therefore ask you to turn to page 19. We're looking to note the report, approve the 2.5% uplifted rate of allowance, approve the scheme of allowances continues to be indexed, the annual local government green book, and note the recommendations made by each of the 6 unitary authority independent remuneration panels have been reviewed in line with the local authorities members allowances regulation. I will propose that from the chair. Looking for a seconder. Councillor Shepherd Bay, thank you. All those in favour, please, members show. That would seem to be unanimous as well. Thank you very much indeed. Here's the new contract standing orders and revised financial regulations, page 37. Who is going to introduce this for us? Connor, we're back to you, Connor.
I can go and just say,
Christian's going to introduce it and then it goes to, yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say that the last year has been extra challenging for the Audit and Governance Committee. There were multiple personnel changes in the committee, multiple years of accounts to consider due to national issues delaying audit of previous years' accounts, extra communications requiring responses to check the integrity and transparency of the procedures and documents produced by RBF FRA over multiple years, interim processes put in place by government with backstop dates by which delayed documents had to be submitted in order for auditors to catch up, all achieved on top of business as usual, including the following. This report is a recommendation from Audit and Governance Committee on the 30th of January 25. The report sets out the proposed new contract standing orders and revised financial regulations. Members of the Audit and Governance Committee scrutinised both documents and sought clarification on part of the process for evaluation of tenders, and various other minor changes and corrections were also proposed, all of which have been reflected in both documents. I must tell you that we could not have accomplished all of that without the clear documents from and open and helpful discussions with senior officers, especially our Chief of Finance and his team, whose efforts have been nothing short of heroic over the last year or so. Him greatly, or them greatly. I'll hand over now to Connor to your overview of the documents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Firstly, the new contract standing orders, they've been completely rewritten as the current standing orders comply with Public Contract Regulations 2015. So the new contract standing orders will comply with the new Procurement Act 2023. And this is due to come into force on the 24th of February 2025. So the objectives of the Act place greater emphasis on delivering value for money and maximising public benefit and acting and being seen to act with integrity. And to achieve these objectives, the Act introduces greater flexibility in the procurement process. For example, for above threshold procurements, the authority will be able to decide whether to use an open procedure or another procedure of its own choice. However, greater flexibility to design our own procedures could lead to increased risk of legal challenge if suppliers are dissatisfied with the procurement process or outcomes. So while the Act does introduce greater flexibility, it also imposes additional responsibilities on contracting authorities. And to aid transparency, there will be new requirements for publishing notices throughout the procurement and contract lifecycle. And this may make the processes more administratively burdensome. The Act does also strengthen the provisions in relation to when suppliers can be excluded from procurement processes, but this in turn means that we will have to closely manage contractual arrangements and document those. So in summary, there will be a radical overhaul of public procurement processes, and hopefully this will yield some benefits over the medium term, but in the short term, it will require a significant investment of time and resource to ensure compliance and minimise risk of legal challenge. In terms of the financial regulations, the only updates relate to updated references to the current governance structure, policies and strategies. Thank you, Chair.
Connor, thank you. And what gives me comfort and assurance is that we've completely rewritten them to comply with the new procurement legislation, which a lot of people are working on up and down the country. So members, thank you, Councillor Kenzie Brown Brown. I'm ever so sorry, Councillor Brown, for introducing that. Members, any questions? Councillor Billy Drummond.
It's a quick one to you, Connor, because it's your responsibility. On page 93, 5.8, the Chief Finance Officer is responsible for maintaining proper security of stock items and should aim to achieve maximum utilization of such assets for provision of the services. Has there been any purloining of any equipment that you know of, or?
Certainly hope not.
I'm just wondering,
No, no.
everyone's checked over? Yeah.
Yes, we have a process in place for issuing equipment.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes, of course, it's a fair question, asset management. We have a lot of assets, a lot of movable equipment. Before we did discuss this with Councillor Drummond, we tried to avoid certain words. We didn't banish purloin. We banished some others. I didn't anticipate that one, but I think we get the gist of what Councillor Drummond was trying to get at. Thank you for your reassurance on that. Members, we're asked to approve the new contract standing orders as set out in Appendix A and the amended financial regulations set out in Appendix B. Plan to take these on block. Are you happy to propose them,
Yes.
Councillor Brown?
Proposal, yeah.
Councillor unhyphenated Brown, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Shepherd Bay, grateful to you. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed, members. All right, I think we can give you a break now, can we? Very good. Thank you. Okay, next up then. Yeah, the pay policy statement. Would that be Becky? Just say your name for my benefit.
Lucy Greenway, because I'm the Senior HR Advisor.
Thank you very much. You're going to introduce this item?
No, don't need to introduce it, it's just yeah, so I'll keep that. Okay, so pay policy statement. So RBFRS are required to prepare a pay policy statement each financial year. All information on staffing post and salary for purposes of the pay multiples are taken from data for the 31st of October 2024. With the exception of a standard annual update to the budget, population of Berkshire, staff figures, pay awards and the pay multiple, it has not been necessary to amend the format of the pay policy statement for 2025-2026. It's only been necessary to include a small number of updates. These are as follows. Inclusion of information on the on-call allowances payable to staff conditioned to the NJC local authority for fire and rescue services. A minor update to the car provision selection relating to generating a baseline lease car allowance to take into account a policy amendment, and a minor update to the section relating to staff uniform. The Fire Authority is invited to approve the pay policy statement subject to any further amendments considered as appropriate.
So, just for my benefit, we're consulting on this? You've said any further recommendations considered appropriate?
So it's not consultation, no, it's just if there's anything in there that you would like to need clarifying or anything like that as a minor amendment, we could do that.
Members, again, something we do routinely. I think the lead member is probably me on this. Everybody's nodding. So it says not applicable. There are people who called me not applicable, but I think it's me. Members, I'm happy to pose this as it's been through a rigorous process, but Councillor Drummond's got a point. What words are you going to use now, Billy?
Maybe again, this might be to Connor. How many members of freelance staff do we use? It says that RBFRS has in some cases found it difficult to recruit suitably fresh and qualified staff through normal channels. In some areas, the use of internal and agency staff and contractors working outside the regulations are in place. Yeah.
Can you, Nikki? Can you help us, please?
Hi, Councillor. Yeah, I can't give you an absolute figure. I can give you the total number, but what we don't use is freelance or contracting staff for permanent positions. What we use them for is to cover and provide kind of specialist support. So things like fire engineering or some specialist stuff around culture at the moment. I think you saw Hazel Anderson Turner last time, who's a business psychologist. So we don't have a high number of staff who are covering permanent substantive posts. We just use them for specialist role input as and when we need them.
And could you give us an idea of the cost?
It's probably under 200,000 out of our budget, per annum.
Okay,
Going to minute this and ask you to come back as an action
Yeah.
at the next fire authority meeting to give us a more precise figure. You're talking about we buy that in for specialist expertise rather than day-to-day roles. I would imagine from time to time you might be buy some ICT expertise in. This is the sort of thing you wouldn't have in the house. It makes sense. Councillor Drummond asked, and I'm sure it's pertinent to many authorities, back at the Unitary Authority, we faced last year, May, a £12 million annualised spend on freelance workers. We've driven that down to 7.5 million, and it's still dropping. So it was an area where we could make tremendous savings in the Unitary Authority, but I don't think, Billy, from what we're hearing here, it is something we could bear down on. It seems reasonable in the grand scheme of things, but if we can get clarity next time, will that help?
thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Splendid, thank you. Lucy, I'm grateful for the introduction. And I beg your pardon, you Vice Chair coming in?
Yeah, I'm apologies for this. I mean, I think this is, I think having the pay policy statement is a great thing, because there is a section there about multiples between the lowest paid employer, the median employer, and the which we keep those multiples, so you don't get the situation where, shall we say, in other corporations where people are earning 5-6 million and other people are on 25 grand, and so we can keep that. So that's the really important parts of this. Actually, my point, actually, sorry, is on page 111, the cycle to work scheme, which is something that I personally support, because outside of doing council work, I do cycle training with children and also lorry drivers, and I sometimes say to them, well, you can use through your company, if they've got a cycle to work scheme, you can get a bicycle for, if it's £1,000, it will roughly cost you £600. However, it says there that you hire them in the document, you actually lease them. There is a distinction. You're not hiring it like you would Boris bikes, or you're leasing them. So it's just a wording thing. And referring back to my previous comments about whether as members we are paid, I don't think I personally as a member could apply through the authority to use one of the cycle to work scheme. That's for paid employees rather than councillors. Sorry, it's a semantic point, but if you're a paid employee of the fire authority, of the fire service, you can do that. And I would really recommend that people sign up to this, because it's a great way of buying a bike and it's cheap, but it is leasing, not hiring. And Becky, you're nodding your head. So.
If I may, I will double check and perhaps take the option to clarify, but I think in the actual scheme it is classified as a hire, and I know it doesn't really sound right, but I think that's the technical term that's in the contract provision, but we can double check and make sure that's replicated right if you're happy to recommend that through.
What it is you do is because you pay by a monthly salary deduction. At the end of it, you're offered the opportunity to then purchase, easily for a very small nominal sum, the bike. It's a leasing scheme. But I mean, look, I don't argue.
Yeah, I think the approach you're talking about is absolutely correct, but the terminology that's used in the provision, it refers to hire. Yeah.
I've not heard anything that would stop us approving it, Vice Chair. Becky. Okay. So we have a proposer. Billy's okay to propose? Who's seconding? Councillor Griffith, thank you very much. But that is on page 97, approving the pay policy statement. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. That's someone else again. Okay, I think we're now on to item 14. Katie Mills is not well this evening, so the Chief is going to introduce this. It is an update on P6 and note about the 3-month evaluation report setting out the impact of its implementation. I think you're touching on P3 as well.
Not really, Chair.
Okay, very briefly. And you were told about this at 5:20. You're ready. Thank you.
It's a good test. No, so unfortunately, Katie with colleagues has done a lot of work on this. So thank you, Chair. And this is obviously, as the Chair says, a report to note, because we made the commitment to members that we'd bring back a 3-month evaluation because there was quite a lot of attention on this topic, and obviously it is one of our community risk management plan key priorities for the 23 to 27 community risk management plan, which is your document, hence that update. So we wish Katie well, and I will try and do a good service by presenting this report for her. We've got an accompanying presentation, so if you could do the next slide, please, Faith, if you're driving. Thank you, and I will very quickly canter through. There is quite a detailed report attached to this, so I'll assume members are familiar with the report, and obviously we can take questions after the presentation, but bearing in mind this is a to note item, I'll canter through. A little bit of a reminder about where it came from. So a number of legal duties that the Fire Authority has, including the development of the Community Risk Management Plan, which sets out how you as an authority will use your resources to effectively manage risk and ensure you provide value for money in discharging your statutory duties. So there is an evidence base, a very comprehensive evidence base that supports the development of a Community Risk Management Plan, the risk methodology. And within that evidence base, it identifies that based on the risk in Berkshire and the demand for incidents in Berkshire over a reference period of a specified period of time, that we require a baseline provision of 14 fire appliances across the county to effectively manage the risk that we face. Clearly, there are some other factors in that around overborder support, mutual aid that we can bring in, national resilience, a range of things, but based on our basic risk management analysis, 14 appliances. Next slide, please, Faith. So priority 6 within the CRMP that you signed off back in the end of 22, start of 2023, reaffirms the authority's commitment to maintaining the 19 fire appliances in Berkshire to assure that baseline provision of 14 appliances. Previously, that baseline provision was only achieved by counting the whole time fire appliances that we have. So we have the 14 whole time and the 5 on-call appliances. Through priority 6 and to support effective management of resources, with a bid to try and reduce an over-reliance on voluntary overtime, priority 6 effectively stated that if one on-call appliance was available and the whole time crewing fell below 14 appliances due to factors including sickness leave, etc., then the on-call appliance could act as the 14th appliance. That change would only be applied at night and when the on-call availability was greater and the number of incidents per hour is lower. So we have more on-call appliances at night, we have fewer incidents at night. If we dropped a whole time appliance but we got an on-call available, we would begin to count that in our total availability, whereby previously we hadn't. So let me catch up. The decision, next slide, please. The decision was taken for a number of reasons. Why were we going to do that? It supports the Fire Authority to meet your statutory duties and public commitments. It improves the resilience and reliability of our baseline provision without being over-reliant on the voluntary use of overtime, and we've seen the increasing trend line in terms of the spend on overtime. Through the reduced use of voluntary overtime, we'd reinvest that funding into our response model through other practical solutions. For example, the 10 additional firefighter posts that the authority agreed and funded last year. We protect the speed of response due to the limited impact on the response model, because again, in that very detailed risk analysis, we identified that there would be a negligible impact on our response standard to incidents because there were fewer incidents at night, and we've already got a degradation plan around which fire engines we make unavailable where the crewing becomes difficult. We would protect welfare of staff, ensuring the voluntary use of overtime is compliant because we were overutilising, we still are overutilising overtime, and there are some agreed national rules about how that should be applied, and at times we are really bumping up against those national rules and in some cases going slightly over them. And we would improve the recognition and the contribution of our on-call staff and the contribution that they make to our response arrangements. It's quite devaluing if you are 5 appliances out of 19 and the availability is counted on 14 of them, and we're not counting your contribution or availability to the overall service provision across Berkshire. So again, it improved that recognition. We originally modelled that we would reduce overtime expenditure by approximately £156,000 to partly fund the additional 10 whole-time firefighter posts, which would again improve the resilience of the 14 whole-time appliances in the longer term. The £156,000 was a modelled figure based on some initial data that we had around looking at previous years' overtime spend, comparing quarter by quarter, because some of the spend is seasonal and aligns with annual leave periods, etc., high demand training periods. So that was kind of modelled up to be approximately 156k, and then obviously we'd have to look back once we'd implemented to see how effectively that was. So what's happened since we've implemented it? These figures differ slightly from the evaluation of as they have been updated to reflect the total period that Priority 6 has been implemented, and we started it on the 16th of September, and we're looking across the entire reference period. So it's been implemented 22 occasions, and that has reduced the overtime expenditure by approximately £22,500 over that reference period. Add the third point now, which is £31,306, where there was more than one on-call appliance available, it would have been £31,306, a reduction in overtime spend. To simplify the initial implementation and to allow the change to embed, the decision was made to only implement if a single appliance could cover the whole shift, hence giving you those two figures there. So we've got the planned cost reduction at 22,600, but had we have taken account of all of the on-call appliances available, it could have been a greater saving. So we now believe that we can operate Priority 6 as originally intended. So if it had been applied to date, that would have meant that those savings would have totaled £31,000, as we've said. So over the course of the year, the reduction in overtime could be in excess of £100,000. So not quite as exacting as the 156, but we know we'd get over £100,000 if we model up from the just over 3 months data that we've got. We also empowered local managers to make risk-based decisions when Priority 6 should be implemented, and the evidence in the evaluation demonstrates that that has been the case. For example, there were 2 occasions where the planned appliance to be degraded, which was Slough, was switched for a different appliance based on local risk at the time. So Slough Fire Station has water rescue capability, there were flood warnings in place, so the local manager decided to degrade winter appliance to keep the water rescue capability available at Slough. So again, we're being pragmatic in its application. There is a graph that we'll come on to in a minute, which shows a slight uplift and a change in the figures. So you can actually see in the data as well where the 10 additional firefighter posts were deployed to station in November 2024. And that just helped a little bit with the resilience of the whole time crewing availability. So there's been no material impact on the response standard. We forecast that in the risk management. We identified that there will be a less than 2% impact on response standard. And again, our data team, Becca in particular, has modelled every incident. So every incident that we attended as an organisation when we've implemented Priority 6 has been reviewed manually and individually to identify any impact on response standard, and there has been no material impact on response standard when you compare incident times with the same reference period over previous quarters of previous years. So again, that kind of negligible impact that we anticipated has actually come to fruition when we look at the real evidence over the reference period of time. So the upshot, therefore, is that Priority 6 has largely done what it was intended to do, and it's certainly supported critical investment into frontline response arrangements. We continue to monitor this through the availability reports, which Tom Brandon brings to Audit and Governance Committee and Management Committee. So we'll include this going forward in those reports to the Fire Authority, so you will have clear line of sight over it. But a key objective of the CRMP was to assure the baseline provision of 14 appliances. Priority 6 was, we knew it would only ever go so far in terms of helping with this, and what we were trying to do was stabilise and get under control the spend on overtime and the availability of appliances to protect the response standard across the county. More work absolutely needs to be done, which is the reference to priority 3, which the chair mentioned. That work started at the beginning of January. Priority 3 is a set project that is running, very, very detailed analysis that looks at ways of working and how we can put longer term resilience into the availability and the resourcing model to make sure that we can maintain the right response standards and the right cover across the county. If priority 3 does what we think it will do and renders the changes that we want, it will arguably make priority 6 redundant. We won't have this issue in terms of spend on overtime and resilience issues around our availability model. So that's the link to priority 6. But the upshot is it's performed as we expected it to. It's had a negligible impact on response standards. It has brought some degree of control to overtime spend. I'm not going to talk to the graph, but you can see the level of data analysis. I'll put it on there for effect that there's a lot of analysis going on around priority 6 and understanding the impacts and the extractions. But hopefully that provides you with a useful summary, and I'm happy to take easy questions. Thank you.
Members, you'll remember that we delayed the implementation of P6. We had quite a bit of representation from the FPU on this, and we gave them an assurance that we would look at this after it'd been in place 3 months. I think this 81.3% is an extremely good indicator that we are achieving our objectives without risk of degrading the service provision. So it's assurance for us, and I hope it gives assurance to the FPU. We'll be monitoring it every quarter. I'm bringing it to management committee every 6 months, I think now, or every quarter for the next couple of quarters. And then we may go 6 monthly when we're into steady state. But members, there you have it, an update on P6. We're keeping our eye on it. I'm sure the FPU will let us know if they have any disquiet. We met with the FPU in the fire liaison group a couple of weeks ago, and although they still had misgivings, they could not point to something not working within the program we've implemented. So members, this is a noted item. You seem comfortable with that. I'm asking you to, I'll propose this from the chair, 2.1, 2.2 on page 117. Seconder, Councillor Shepherd-Bay, thank you. All those in favour of noting this item? Very good indeed, thank you. Good evening. Members will recall the government consulted on enabling remote attendance at meetings, and they consulted also on remote voting. We've had remote attendance for some time, and this is a move forward where somebody attending remotely could actually vote on a debate. We'll see what the government come out with. The world we live in now does enable remote attendance. The misgiving we have to describe was, and if we put it in the response, which is in there, you can see the response, it was a cross-party response. So we shared it amongst the lead members. As a member being at home, we'd like them to appear to be in the room and stay involved in the debate and the discussion and the meeting. And how do you make sure of that when the temptation is to switch the camera off, go on mute and pop off and watch EastEnders or whatever's your pleasure, and then keep your ears open and say, oh, the vote's coming up, I better switch on again now and vote the way I plan to vote. Now that's the worry I'd have, because you may doze off in the room, you might be noticed, you might not, but at least you're in the room. So we made our representations. Forces higher than us will decide on this. But clearly, driving miles and miles and miles to an event, and if you think about some of the size of the authorities up and down the country, all driving into a city centre, it is quite a commitment, and therefore the idea of voting and being involved remotely is persuasive in many respects. I'm on my soapbox here for a moment, but I know you want to come in, and then we'll have, I can imagine that, we'll have probably another 15 interventions if we allow it, but bear in mind our curfew. So, the remote attendance has a lot of merit, but I say, how do you make sure that people are engaged being so far away? I'll bring in the Vice Chair and anybody else now. You've seen our response. We'll see what the government come back with. Vice Chairman.
Yeah, no, I think this is I think our response wasn't all party, and we came with, I think, a sensible and pragmatic approach. Will be very interesting to see what the results of the consultation are and what decisions are made. I mean, the other sector, I mean, obviously, moves like people leaving their cameras on are not going to feed the dog or barking in the background, all that sort of stuff that you must attend and be seen. I think that is important, but equally, I mean, it's good to see for especially for budget meetings, particularly for budget meetings, that actually the meeting is quorum in person. Now, clearly, if people have been sick today or had an incident, you'd want to, for the budget, you want to vote remotely. At the moment, you can't, and I think that's wrong. But equally, I think there is an obligation on people to actually turn up in person, particularly which we said in our response, because this isn't just about presenteeism, but it is about, obviously, we meet as groups, we discuss things, and it's very difficult to do that remotely. So, it's good to see the attendance here tonight. There's only a couple of people who've given apologies. So I'm hoping that the government, when they consider this, will allow voting, but with certain restrictions that we noted in here, we shall see. So, I think, we live in a very modern age of technology, so we need to be able to use it. But equally, I think there should be some basic restrictions on it, and that's what we've said in our response.
Thank you. I mean, the other thing occurs to me is you could end up with the same 6 always attend, and the other 14 never do. Pretty bad for the 6 who flogged their way in. But hey, we'll see what happens. I don't have to vote to note this, I'm told. So nod your head, we note it. How about that? And we watch this space. Thank you very much. Full plan, page 155 to 156. We note that, I think, members, it can change. It's actually not as restricted as we are in our unitary authorities. You can put stuff on there quicker than 28 days notice, but it is what it is, and I commend it to you. So noted. Thank you. Yeah. And then minutes of the standing committees. Note the minutes. Date of the next meeting, 17th of April, 6:30. Safe journey home, members. Thank you for your attendance. Oh, 2 other things. I have 2 other things. I've got you. I've just remembered the 2 other things. You're one of them. The first one up, though, is much more important than you. Sorry. It is to draw attention to somebody who's given 15 years and 1 month service, faithful service to this authority. You know where I went there, didn't you? And who had a big birthday recently, and I'd like to congratulate our very own Faith for all her work, and I hope you did something really well.
Off a holiday as well.
And came on off our holiday. So a round of applause, please. And now, Councillor Mackenzie.
I agree, Chair.
I'll get it. Up to you. Up to you.
May I just say, I'm a member of the Joint Climate Action Board for Bracknell Forest, and we would very much like to invite the ACO, Katie, and Paul, Safe, to come and speak to us about the Royal Berks Fire and Rescue's green credentials. That will be on the 2nd of May. So Paul we already spoke about this very loosely at the members' workshop some weeks ago. But I thought I'd just let everybody know that we're thinking about green, that we're thinking about the holistic view of all of our residents throughout Berkshire, as well as Bracknell Forest. So I'm hoping that Katie will be able to make that date, but certainly Paul has. Anyway, we'll update you, Chief and Chair, of what happens at that meeting. So can I just say thank those officers very much just for getting that extra time.
Very good too. And that is the end of the meeting. Thank you very much, members.